Men are the prize podcast. Thanks for coming back. And again, I'm blessed. I'm honored to have another Black man on here so we can talk and chop it up. Oliver Marcelle is with us this week. How are you today, sir?
I'm good, man. I'm excited about this conversation. I love the opportunity to chop it up, man. And I believe that it's important that men are having crucial conversations.
No
This is
doubt.
it's important, man. It's imperative. I'm realizing now, and I'm sure it'll come out in the conversation. I'm realizing now in this period of my life, more than any other period, the importance of having other Black men around me, men in general, but definitely Black men around me that I can talk to, that I can bounce things off of, that I can get perspective from. Because it's not all about what I'm thinking, what's in my head.
No
I need
doubt.
some perspective as well, man. And, being a loner, a self-proclaimed loner for many, many years, I'm realizing that, time is up for that kind of stuff, man. We need these conversations.
Excellent. And there's a question I have towards the end that will kind of circle back to cover everything you just spoke about. But
Absolutely.
I agree. I will say this: when I came up with this idea for this podcast, one, I really like the idea of men talking. But for me, it was really the idea of Black men talking. We don't do that. We're not raised to talk. We're not raised to express our emotions. We rub dirt on it and we move on. We deal with it. We just run through a brick wall and we move on. So I like the opportunity to talk, to tell my friend, my wife, whomever, what's going on is so important. But what I've discovered is it's men. I've had more white men on this than brothers. And not that I mind, because inevitably we're kind of going through the same thing. I think our conversation has a little nuance to it. And hopefully when we talk, we'll get into it.
Absolutely.
But that's what I really wanted. I wanted to see two Black men sitting down talking, and I'm having a hard day and blah, blah, whatever. And we'll get into that. But I start this podcast the same way every episode. I am an expert in one thing, and that is being me. I like the ideas of this podcast because I want men to talk. I want us to express ourselves, to cry, to be mad, to do whatever, to just don't hold it in. Whatever we're dealing with is best. It's best suited outside in the world, not being held in. So my hope with this is that anyone who's listening or watching, hopefully this gets you going, the fire in your soul to talk to somebody. You're going through something and don't feel like you're alone, that there's nobody you can talk to. At best, this is a conversation between two friends. I feel like Oliver and me, we're going to be tight.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is two friends talking. But if you're going through something and you need to talk to somebody, if you get nothing else from this podcast, find someone, a friend, a mentor, a teacher, anyone, someone who's trained for this, a psychotherapist, a psychologist, anyone. Don't hold it. When we hold into our emotions, when we keep it in, bad things happen. Yeah. Titles like toxic masculinity, stuff like that comes about when we don't deal with ourselves properly. So take this opportunity to think of the person you can talk to find the person that will listen to you so that you'll be a better person in general.
Man,
and
I sign off on that 100%.
Cool. That's a good start. And with that said, let's get started. I ask every man who comes on here, if you could give me a quick 30-second bio. Tell me, if you had to tell, you only had 30 seconds to tell me about you, what would you tell me?
30-second bio. I am passionate about all things relationships and men's empowerment. So as such, I live in those spaces, help couples communicate without frustration and judgment, build intimacy, create the relationship of their dreams, and help men, empower men to overcome the man laws that we have been holding on to, the ideologies that have been detrimental to us as husbands and fathers, and show up as the best version of ourselves in business and in personal life. That's where I live.
I like it. I'm finding that house myself. I like where you started.
Yeah.
So what I came up with, like I mentioned, the word prize. This is a word that I've always liked. And I think I always heard that women are the prize and the bride. And, everything was kind of focused around the woman. And I really thought we're pretty important too. And I say we as men. So I took the word prize and I broke it down into different characteristics that I think exemplify what a good man can be or what he knows. So the first letter in the word prize is P, and the word is purpose. Purpose is defined as a reason for which something is done or created or for which something exists. So, sir, what is your purpose?
That's a phenomenal question. And I didn't realize that what it was until late in life. And when I say late in life, I mean within the last 8 years or so. I realized that my purpose is to share my journey in hopes that it will encourage and inspire others on their journey. I I held so much of that in. You talked about it just now, where we weren't taught to let certain things out. We weren't taught to show certain emotions. We weren't taught to share certain things. Like certain things stayed in the house. Like I come from West Indian parents. Like, don't put our business out in the street.
Got that right.
Like that, like we got in trouble for that.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it was stuff that we thought was insignificant, they were like, don't put our business out in the street. So I grew up holding on to a whole lot of stuff. And now what I'm realizing is that my purpose is to share that, because there are other people who are holding on to it and they don't know what to do with it. And they don't realize that they can navigate it successfully. And it doesn't have to own them, and it doesn't have to define them. Matter of fact, it can be the fuel that lights a fire under them to be who they're called to be and to find their purpose. I tell guys this all the time. You have a passion, a purpose, and a path, and you can discover all of those things with a little persistence. So I'm realizing that my purpose is to share my journey, the good, the bad, the ugly, the great, the not so great, and show you how I navigated it so that it will encourage and inspire you on your journey as well.
Did you have a man like that growing up?
So I had several men like that. If I think about it in hindsight, and I wrote a book, and in that book, I mentioned some of those names. I didn't realize what they were doing at the time. And it wasn't until I really started having those moments of self-discovery that I realized, okay, I got this from this guy, I got this from that guy. But there's one person in particular that I pull out. And when I was in college, I met the person who ended up marrying myself and my wife. But I met him early on, before I had even gotten into this relationship with the person who is now my wife, Dr. Anthony Kelly. He's no longer alive. God rest his soul. But I watched him operate. I watched how he was with his wife. I watched how he was with his family. I watched how vulnerable he was. Like, and this was a man's man. I'm talking about man's man, like rugged, but could dress well. Like both ends of the spectrum, rugged, dressed well. Street dude, preacher, family man. I mean, it was like, who does that? Like, I hadn't seen that. You know what I mean? I was like, who can embody all of this and still be who they are? And I watched this guy navigate. And up until that point, I wasn't sure what I was looking for. I just knew I hadn't found it yet. Like, what kind of man I wanted to be, what kind of husband did I want to be, what kind of father did I want to be? And watching him, I was like, that's it. Because you can do all of those things and still be a man and still be respected, and nobody's going to look down at you. It was an eye-opening experience for me. So that's one of the guys that I matter of fact, the book is dedicated to my son and to him. He's one of those guys that I mentioned that allowed me to observe some level of observation, training, execution, and feedback that I took from him and his experience.
How important was it to see a man, because you mentioned it was like one of the first things you said, a vulnerable man? How important was it for you to see a man who was comfortable enough to be open with his wife, with his family, with his friends? How did that spark in you? What did that do for you?
Honestly, because let's keep it a buck. Honestly, in the beginning, I was like, nah, I'm not doing that. because that's not where we came from, right? So my father, who I revere, I mean, is a phenomenal individual, but he was one of those guys, from West Indian background. You're not gonna see him sweat. I don't even know that I saw him get like super angry. Even keel. The world could be falling around him, but You don't know that he's being phased by it. And that's what I took on. I was like, this is what I got to do. So you're not going to see me sweat. You're not going to see me get riled up. And if I do, there's going to be a good reason for it. And I'm going to be able to rationalize any of my behavior, but not rationalize it in any way that aligns with me being vulnerable or being scared or being any of those things. So when I first saw that, I was like, nah, I'm good. I've done well up until this point, so I'm just going to continue to be me. But then as the relationship with the woman who's now my wife, as that began to develop, that's when I started making the connection between what I was seeing him do and what I was experiencing in my relationship, especially after I got married, because I was taking some ideologies into my marriage that were not working. And then I found myself literally asking the question in my head, okay, what would Kelly do? And trying to recreate and emulate that. And then starting to see a pattern of change, like, oh, okay. So this is beneficial then. Like this actually works. Like this could work in my favor. Yeah. And that's when I really started to realize the importance of it. But in the beginning, man, I was like, nah, I'm good, bro. Like you can have that. I'm not treating no woman like that.
Isn't it interesting that you can have a male in your life, but when you get a man in your life, things change, things shift, ideologies, opinions, expectations, thoughts, the way you carry yourself. It's amazing what one really good influence can do for a man. One really good one.
Yep. It only takes one, man, to really change your perspective and to open you up to a perspective. Really is what he did. And I had several people that I can kind of point back to that did that in certain areas.
Right.
So like my dad, what I love about him is his work ethic.
Mm-hmm.
And it is unmatched. To this day, I have yet to live up to that. And the value system that comes from that. And then there was a pastor that I was involved with that really was, a man of the people and was willing to listen to young folk in a time where nobody was doing it, where everybody was like, hey, listen, bro, like this grown folks business, like go to your room or do whatever. He was welcoming our opinions, which I find myself doing now when I sit with young folk or if I go to schools and that kind of thing. And so there's different pieces that I pick from different people, but it is so important to find somebody that gives you the freedom and space to grow and to self-discover, but also set some parameters that you don't even see that allow you to steer you down this path towards effective, essential manhood. It's so important to have that person that can do that for you and not judge you in the process.
There you go. And that's the thing. Becoming the man you want to be is easier when you can feel comfortable trying.
Yeah.
It's a struggle when you got people telling you how to be, and that's society. That's this world. I'm not supposed to be vulnerable. I'm not supposed to be comfortable. Hard day, head on my wife's shoulder. I'm struggling. Right. Mental illness. That's another thing about our community. I could talk all day. Let's move on. Mental health is it's crazy to me how taboo mental health is in our community. Even idea of finding somebody to talk to. Like, why? You crazy? Or go talk to the usher at your church or find the pastor. That's fine. But to pay somebody,
right?
It's amazing what we hold on to. But I'm sure we'll get into that. We'll jump on. The next letter in the word P.R.I.Z.E is R, and the word is resilience. Resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and toughness. Can you think of a time in your life, a situation where you discovered that you had resilience?
A time that I discovered that I had it. I think it was built into me. I'll put it that way. Because it's funny how the things that we've been taught, the man laws, if you will, the ideologies, they're not all bad. What we weren't taught is how to balance them. in particular scenarios, right? So you can't be all hardcore all the time, but there is some level of strength and resilience that is needed in certain scenarios where you're going to have to be quote unquote tough and ready to take things, right? But you can't do that all the time. It's not an all or nothing kind of thing, right? And so for me, I think my dad built that into me. Like, hey, listen, things are going to happen. You're going to have to look at the lesson in it, draw out the lesson in it, and use that as a catalyst for what you do next. I feel like I didn't really, because we you kids, you listen but you don't hear, right? I don't think I really understood what that meant until I was in college. And so in college, long story short, I took the scenic route through college for a lot of reasons. Some were my fault, some were the university's fault. The initial thing that threw me off course was the university. They phased out the program that I went there for. But when they phased it out, I was already so deep in debt that I couldn't transfer credits anywhere. So now I'm like, all right, what's my whole vision of what life was going to be like is unraveling at this point. So what am I going to do? Now, I'm not saying I made the best decisions, but that's when I realized, okay, when things don't go right, you can't just be like, all right, I'm going to sit in my dorm room for the next 6 months. Like, I got to come up with something. And that's what kind of got me through that period. And then, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, God works in mysterious ways. That led to a myriad of bad experiences for the next several years, where I always had to change course or always had to go back to the drawing board. And there were times where, I'll be honest, where I'm like, man, it ain't even worth it. Like, I'm going to just do me. And there were times that I did just was like, you know what, forget it. I'm just going to do me. I'm going to while out for 6 months and then realize, wait a minute, this is taking me nowhere. So, all right, what are we going to do next? And so fast forward with that seesaw of going back and forth, it has been beneficial in my married life and in business because there are things that happen that you didn't plan for. I'll give you a great example. Last year, I had a phenomenal plan about how I was going to do this group coaching experience, and I had everything mapped out. And I didn't have all my eggs in one basket, but I did hang a lot of, I put a lot of eggs in the basket.
Okay.
It didn't work. So now, what do you do in those scenarios? And that's, when I talk to guys, especially young guys, what do you do when you feel like you've prepared for something? You feel like you're ready for something. You feel like you've set up all of these ducks and lined them up in a certain way that when you hit them, they're going to all fall, and they don't. What happens next, right? Do you give up? Do you consider yourself a failure? Or do you do some level of evaluation like you would if you played basketball and you took a terrible L, right? Those guys go back, they watch tape, they see where things went wrong, they regroup, they add some stuff to their playbook, or they take some stuff away depending on what the situation is, and then they use all of that to go out on the court the next day and do something different. And that's what I have been finding myself doing over the course of my life through many, my brother, disappointments.
Wow. I believe it. I feel you. I hear you talking, and a few things catch me. One, I mentioned at the beginning that I expected to have a lot more Black men on this because of the nuance. And one thing you talked about, the built-in resilience that you have with your father. I feel like as Black men, there's a certain built-in resilience with us.
There is.
Because we're dealing with a different society than white men in this world. We are automatically a criminal, or we're dangerous, or we're angry. So we just have to be stronger to begin with. So it's there, and what we do with it's important.
Yeah, it is. I agree with that, and I believe that's probably 100% why my father dealt with us the way he did. And what I had to realize, though, going back to the balance thing, what I realized later on in life is that it's not all or nothing, right? So the very thing that keeps us going sometimes kills us because we don't understand balance, and we don't understand the nuance of when to turn it up, when to level it off, when to turn it down based on our specific needs and the specific scenarios that we find ourselves in. That's something that I don't, at least in my generation, I didn't see taught. And so we made a lot of mistakes because we had our foot heavy on the gas when we should have been coasting. It's not necessarily that we got to cower and do all of that. I don't believe in that, but sometimes putting your foot on the gas, heavy on the gas, if you lose control, which often I did, being a hothead, and being very wearing my emotions on my sleeve, not necessarily in a vulnerable way, but in a like the chip kind of way, like you owe me, and approaching scenarios like that, and not realizing that there are some nuances to that, and there's some ways to harness that so that you're not cowering, but at the same time you're not tearing down something that really would be your benefit. And so that's something I learned the hard way.
We can't be militant all the time, man. Yeah. Sometimes we have to, kind of be accepting or prepare for what's coming. We can't assume the worst all the time. We got to prepare for better. So I hear you. I agree.
Yeah, there's a strategic component to it that I don't know that we're often taught.
Oh, there's so much that we're not taught. There's so much. We could do a whole pod on just the things that we don't know.
You're right.
That we don't know. There's so many things that would make life easier or would prepare us for life as we progress through it. Yeah, but I like the resilience there. I'm going to skip I because that's the last part.
Okay.
Z. The word is zeal. My favorite word in this. And the definition is enthusiastic devotion. What are you enthusiastically devoted to?
Man, enthusiastically devoted to family, enthusiastically devoted to God. I'm a man of faith, and so I believe in the guiding principles that I live by happen to align to, I don't want to box it, but I'll say Christian. I'll use that word, align to some principles of faith. Very, very much gung-ho about relationships and men's empowerment, just about seeing the light bulb going off. And so a lot of zeal towards this business that my wife and I are growing, and just trying to balance all of those in a way that is not a burnout for me, but at the same time allows me to be impactful in other people's lives. And so I push real hard for all those things, man. Wife, people who've been around me long enough know, wife, kids. I have a grandson now. Family is it's right up there with whatever else is up there. You know what I mean? So God, family, and this business of helping folk and being used to be an impact.
Religion, Christianity, or spirituality. Was that important growing up?
It was important growing up. Now, again, I'm gonna be honest. It was important to my parents.
Right. Me too. I know the feeling.
We just was along for the ride.
Yep.
We were just along for the ride. And so many things I picked up later on in life. Growing up, the thing that caused us to buck against the spiritual component in our lives was that it felt very boxy. It felt like one size fits all. Put this shirt on and you better wear this shirt. Doesn't matter if it's too big, doesn't matter if it's too small. Then I don't care. I don't even want to hear about it. And then realizing that there's a very important piece of this that is not being taught, which is relationship and alignment to values, right? So it's not about me doing what I see my mom and dad do, because that's tradition and that's what's supposed to happen, but I have no connection to it at all as it relates to relationship. And then realizing, okay, wait a minute, there's more to this. Like, I got to figure this thing out for myself. What is important to me? What are the values that are important to me? What are the things that I want to live by? What are the things I want to be known for? What are the things that when people look at me, they can immediately be like, oh yeah, he said that. Oh yeah, he's gonna do it because he's a man of his word. Because so don't even worry about it. If he said he's gonna do it, he's gonna. So what are those things? And then when I started to really kind of dig into that and develop in those areas, I realized, oh, these are spiritual principles right here. you know,
Okay.
I didn't have to really, it didn't have to look like my parents. It's me and it's my thing. So that was really helpful. And that didn't come till way later in life. I was already married with kids when I realized that, wait a minute, I'm not going about this the right way.
It's interesting. I grew up same way. My father, I grew up with my father most of the time, Seventh-day Adventist, hardcore, and I went the opposite direction than you did. I always tell people, because I'm an atheist, and
Okay.
I tell people, like, the reason I'm not religious is because I didn't go to church. I was taken, and there's a difference to me. I was dragged to church, and I'm a kid. I'm a teenager growing up. I wanted to play football. I couldn't play football because church was on Saturday. I miss all these things. So these things I didn't get to do. So growing up, I rightly or wrongly attached negativity to religion, to all these things that I wanted to do. I couldn't succeed, couldn't do all this stuff because it was church. It was Sabbath from Friday night sunset to set, all these things. And eventually, with time, I just found it hard to believe that there's a deity out there that is allowing things to happen. So that's the kind of direction that I went in. I'm an atheist now. I was agnostic, and with time, I've just kind of gone in the opposite direction. But it's
Okay.
interesting to see experiences and how they affect you and how you take it. And I know I took it in the extreme way, but
Hey, listen, I understand. And the reason why I'm smiling is because our background is the same. So that I was raised SD as well. So I understand exactly what you're describing, right? Because the nuance between religious tradition and relationship was not at all displayed in my younger years. You're seeing that a lot more now with the younger generation of pastors that are coming in, and they're rocking the boat, so to speak. They're not really rocking the boat. They're really just enlightening everyone to what we should have known all along.
right.
Is that relationship is key to this, right? It's just like your marriage doesn't look like my marriage, but your marriage has some core ingredients that my marriage has, because there are some core ingredients that have to be there. Like I just telling somebody the other day, like, two of my favorite cakes are pound cake and red velvet. They look very, very different. But at the core of those cakes are a couple of the same things: eggs, sugar, butter, right? We weren't taught that. We were like, you better be a pound cake and you better be in a bundt pan. And I don't care whether you like it or you don't like it. That's what it's going to be. Right. And that's what it does. That's what it does for many of us. Right. When we realize and get to a place where we're like, oh, wait a minute. There's something else out there. Right. And so I get it. I 100% get it.
It's interesting. Yeah, I remember when I really decided, I told my mom that, and she took it wrong. She took it as the fact that I was thinking for myself and questioning it. She took that as the bad thing. And
Right.
for me, I've always thought me thinking and contemplating and analyzing shouldn't make religion harder to believe. It should be easier. My faith should be strengthened. It could be tested, but it shouldn't be broken by thought. I should be able to question things, and I shouldn't be like, oh wow, this can't possibly be real because I questioned it. So I went through a lot, and I'm like, finally, I just don't have it. And I'll never say never. I don't think I want to do that. I always say to people, because my uncle, who's a pastor, who did my wedding, who did my vow renewal, because I determine I'm an atheist, but that's not my wife. That's not my kids.
Got you.
They're gonna see that, and then they're gonna decide for themselves.
Mhm.
So religion or lack of now has always been an interesting part of my life. But obviously, I see how important it is for you.
Yeah, and it's gotten more important as I began to make that transition into, okay, I need to understand what are the core values that I'm trying to live by, and realizing that they do align to some principles, some biblical principles, some Christian in the sense of following Christ principles. And then I just started to build that on my own, like, because there were some things that I was like, okay, if I continue down this road, I won't go. I won't be involved. Like I just, because it doesn't, some of the stuff that we hold dear in the traditional sense don't align with my value system. So now what are you saying? Are you saying that somebody's right and somebody's wrong, right? You know what I mean? So, and when you get to that point, I really had to do, some real soul searching on my own, and got to a point, like I said, very recently, got to a point where I'm like, wait a minute, this is relationship based, man. And I got to make sure that I'm living the best version of myself. That's not always going to look like what you think it should look like from a traditionalistic standpoint, but from a holistic faith standpoint, you're going to see me live out some values that I feel like are important to me. And I think that that's, at the end of the day, is what needs to be put out front.
Okay. So obviously you really like talking to men about anything but relationships.
I love it.
Yeah, so give me something. Now I'm sure you've spoken to hundreds of men in different parts of relationships, dealing with themselves, with whomever they're going to be with, a significant other. Give me something that's holding men back in terms of really having a successful relationship with A, themselves, and then B, with a significant other.
Honesty. We are not we're not always honest with ourselves. We're not always honest about how we're feeling. We're not always honest about the fact that we don't have it all together. We're not always honest about the importance of the other person to us. Like we live in this culture right now where if I'm doting on my wife, and if I'm, talking about, mutual submission and all these kinds of things, I'm a simp. Mm-hmm. 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 And don't nobody want to be called that. Right. You know what I mean? So, and so that keeps us from being honest. So I can't say that about my wife. I can't feel that way. Even if I deep down in my core, I'm like, this is what aligns me to this woman. We can't do it. And so what I've encountered, just put it that way, what I've encountered is that there's a level of honesty that when men really realize that they can make that adjustment, and that adjustment is not a threat to their authenticity. When they actually realize that opens the floodgates. Because that's the thing, right? I don't want to do that because I've already shown you who I am and who I believe is my authentic self. So if I do anything different, now you're gonna be like, oh, well, he fake. Nah, bruh, that's not how it works. The adjustments are not going to be a threat to your authenticity. The adjustments are things that help you navigate in a way that allows you to accomplish whatever your goal is. And the example I give, right, to guys, and this is when they're like, oh yeah, you know what, you're right. So think about a basketball team. So if you play point guard and I'm the coach, and I come to you after a game and I'm like, listen, do me a favor. Next time against opponents that are left-handed, I want you to pivot right in your defensive stance. I'm asking you to make an adjustment, right? Are you no longer a point guard?
Of course, I'm still in, no doubt.
You're still a point guard. Yeah. Still a point guard. You're still playing your position. You're making an adjustment that is going to set you up for some level of success. It's actually going to work in your favor, and we're not taught that. And so once that honesty comes out and you're like, man, I can be honest about how I'm feeling. I can be honest about what my desires and dreams and goals and visions are, and how this other person, if we're talking specifically about romantic relationships, how this other person in my life contributes to that, and I can still be me with all that too. Oh yeah, it's on now. It's on.
I like that. Let me respond to the honesty thing though.
Yeah.
Is it that we're not honest with ourselves, or is it possible, and this is just a thought, that we may not have, and I'm gonna have to elaborate, access to honesty? And what I mean is this: I can believe and know that I'm a good man, that I love my wife, and that we're together, and I submit to her, and I do things for her that I haven't done for any other woman, blah, blah, blah. But if I don't have somebody to tell about that, if I don't have somebody I can be honest with about how I feel, is it possible that the reason we haven't been honest is because I don't have anybody besides that person to be honest with? Is that a possibility?
Without a doubt, that is a possibility. It is, definitely. It is a possibility. And the reason why I agree with you is because I think about myself. So me being that person who did not share and was not going to let you know that these things were happening with me. You always saw the same person whenever I came out. You always saw it looked like I had it all together, looked like everything was cool. When I got married, it took me a long time to even allow my wife into that space. So what I realized I had done is and I was telling another guy this, I had actually created a prison for myself. So I had built this wall around myself that limits, completely cuts off my access, because I'm not coming over the wall and I ain't letting you over the wall.
Right.
So yeah, I agree with that. 100% access is necessary, because some of us we don't do it for either because we cut ourselves off or because we've just never had that opportunity. We've never seen it happen. It's never been offered to us. It's never been presented to us that this is even a possibility or something that you should consider.
It's simple. When I think about relationships and just men in general, how we deal with each other and ourselves, sometimes it's as simple as being told it's okay to be something, to be happy, to be sad, to know that I'm not okay and be willing to talk about it. Sometimes it's as simple as allowing to feel how I feel and not fighting it. It's important. We kind of talk about mental health. You mentioned honesty. How important is mental health, your personal mental health, and then the mental health of your marriage? How important is it to you? And do you talk about that when you talk to men or when you talk to couples?
Yeah, it's paramount. One of the chapters in my book is on mental stamina. And so the chapters in my book align with some of the things that I personally grappled with. Excuse me, and goes through my journey of self-discovery in those areas. And one of them is mental stamina. I believe, to answer your question, it is paramount to the success, to my success and to the success of my relationship, because I understand what it looks like when you're sweeping it under the rug. So being someone who has had panic attacks and has dealt with anxiety and has done some things, have seen it in my son and other folks. And it's important, man, that we're opening up pathways for individuals to feel the freedom to do two things. One, express it. And two, that like what you said, that it's okay to express. And maybe if I want to add a three, that expression and those things that you're expressing are not identifiers as it relates to who you are. They are specific things that you are attempting to navigate using who you are. So often we're like, oh, well, that's who he is. He's this, he's that, or she's this, she's that. No. That's something they're navigating. They're trying to use who they are to navigate that. What are we going to do to help facilitate that? So it's super important. It's the lifeblood, I would say. It's the thing that we've ignored for so long, only to find out that it is literally the the cord that runs through all of our experiences.
So
And we don't, and then we're trying to, we're knocking our heads up against the wall. Like, why is this not working? Why is that not working? Why do I feel like this? Why can't this? Because you're ignoring the core. You're ignoring the thread that's going through all of those things, which is your mental health and stamina.
And we're not raised with our mental health in our, in our vision, in our face. How are you feeling? Why don't you feel this way? How do you want to feel? Do you know what you need to do to feel that way? It's mind-boggling. And I think about this. I love these conversations because every time I talk to somebody, something else just comes to me. Mm-hmm. And I have 4 kids. I have a son, 3 daughters. And I've done my best to raise them the same. And we're gonna fall and we're gonna treat girls a bit different. We're gonna treat boys a bit different. And I'm guilty of the rub dirt on it and move on, be man type stuff.
Yep, me too.
But if we were able to consistently raise our girls and our boys the same way, everything would be so much easier. My son grows up sensitive, comfortable, vulnerable. My girls pretty much are going to, because that's just the way they are. My boy, I have to kind of put that into him. Mm-hmm. If you imagine a world with a bunch of vulnerable, comfortable men running around with women who pretty much are raised that way, we're not going to wipe out all mental health issues, but we're going to narrow it down significantly. The relationships within ourselves will be better. Our marriages will be better. And just in general, relationships between men and women, because empathy is the word we're missing, I think. The empathy to understand what other people are going through and understand that person is struggling, and to be able to know that I could talk to that person. I understand. Just because he's a man doesn't mean that he's not hurting.
You're right.
It's simplistic, but obviously it's huge.
You're right. And it's paramount. And the thing that's keeping us from doing that is recognizing it. So the recognition piece is missing. So I'm not even taught to be able to recognize that in you, that there's something happening, because we're not taught to show that. So because we're not taught to show that, we're not taught to recognize it either, right? Or the recognition that we do, for those of us who do recognize something, because we're not taught to show it, we categorize it as something negative. Yep. So growing up, you're feeling some kind of way, and your pops is like, dude, get yourself together.
Exactly.
So he recognized it, but because of how it's been categorized, his recognition didn't lead to empathy. It led to correction.
Right.
And so we're always trying to correct people's behavior, and we're not even paying any attention to the mindset. So why do you think that way? Why are you acting out this way? What are you feeling? No, we're not trying to do none of that. Correct your behavior, bro. Like, stop doing that. Get yourself together. Man up. This ain't how it's supposed to go. Go apply yourself. Yeah. Right. So what we have to start doing now, right. So what we have to start doing now is recognizing it and allowing that recognition to lead to empathy. And in order for that recognition to lead to empathy, there's a certain level of work we got to do within ourselves. Like, in order for me to recognize something in you and then be empathetic with you, I have to first recognize something in me and be okay with what I'm recognizing, and be okay with the path that I need to take to navigate that. Because then when I see it in you, I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. I'm with you. I got you, bro. I know what's up. As opposed to, dude, come on, man up, dude.
So many times. Right. And I fight myself doing it, and I'm like, I see it's so ingrained. It's just like in your DNA. Before you know it, it's just spilling out, and I gotta stop. Bring that back. What's wrong? It's a constant effort. But I'm loving this conversation. The last letter in the word prize is E, and that for me stands for expectation. A strong belief that something will happen or be the case in the future. I typically ask this question about you, but I'm going to change it because of what you do, talking to men and the couples. Mm-hmm. When you talk to men in couples, maybe they're troubled or they're just trying to improve, what expectations should a man have in himself and in a relationship? What should he be looking to do better?
So I'll start the answer off by saying this. Something I tell guys often is that you can't demand something you haven't first developed. So as it relates to expectations, those expectations, I try to get guys to look inward first before they look outward. So what are the things, and sometimes you got to look outward to understand what's inward. So sometimes I'll ask a guy, okay, what's the vision you have? What is the ideal for this relationship? If it's a relationship, or what is the ideal for this career goal or whatever it is that they're striving for? And they'll map that out. And then I'll say, okay, what do you need to do in order for that to take place? What adjustments do you need to make? Because often what we'll do is we can easily map out our ideal, but then we're like, okay, well, this person need to do that, and she need to do this, and he need to do that. And if all these other people do that, then this will happen. But we don't always turn inward. And so often I'm looking at expectations through the lens of self-development. So if you're looking for integrity, you got to develop that in yourself. If you're looking for honesty, if you're looking for commitment, which requires consistent effort, then you got to be putting in consistent effort. If you're looking for if you're looking to be trusted, then you got to be trustworthy. If you're looking for, and so a lot of those expectations, because guys will come to me sometimes and be like, well, this is what I'm looking for. I'm like, all right, cool. Are you doing that? And they're looking at me like, what's that got to do with what we talking about? Like, bro, can't demand what you haven't first developed. So let's take this back to the beginning, and then we can work up to, I'm not saying what you're looking for is not right, but you're going to consistently be hitting your head up against a brick wall if you don't have it.
We need to embody what we want.
Yeah.
I really like that idea. Yeah, I like that. And it's acknowledging that we have fault and that we are at times the cause of problems. Sometimes we are the worst enemy.
Yep.
We got to look ourselves in the eye and acknowledge that we can't expect better until we're better ourselves.
You're absolutely right. There has to be some level of assessment that takes place. Mm-hmm. Has to be. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't work without it.
Yeah. And I think if you're doing it right, and as a man in a relationship trying to improve, I think the benefit to that is your significant other can see, if you're really putting the work in, that you're trying to be a better person, and that can only lead to better things. At least it shows commitment. It shows I'm willing to be honest. It shows I'm willing to be vulnerable. Look at what this person is doing to be in a better place with me. Now I need to step up. And I feel like it kind of starts the snowball effect. I'm doing good. Oh, wow, look what this man is doing for me. I need to do the same thing. It's so interesting,
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm glad you said, because that's an important piece as well, because let's be honest. It's tough. And we established that, right? It is tough to unravel the years and years of stuff that's been ingrained in us, and now filtered it through look at it through a different lens. And what I often tell guys who are at a better space, because I don't think we all ever arrive. I think we're always on this journey. But for guys who are further down the road, I always tell them, listen, there is some level of observation, training, execution, and feedback that you had to go through in order to get to where you are. You watch somebody do it. So if you think about it in the corporate space, right? If you hire me to work for you, come day one, I'm not doing all 50 things that are on the job description on day one. You may sit me with somebody to shadow who has done the job or knows the job. I'm going to shadow them for a little while. And then at some point, I'm going to get some hands on. So that's the training piece. I'm going to be able to do it while they're watching over my shoulder, be like, hey, do this, or no, don't do that. Then at some point, they're going to be like, hey, you ready to go, bro? Here's your office. Go forth and be great. That's the execution phase. And then there's going to be evaluation, whether it's a monthly, quarterly, biannually, annually, whatever it is. You're going to have this evaluation to see whether what you're doing aligns with the guiding principles that you were given in the beginning. And if so, good job. Let's do some goal setting for the next period. Or if not, maybe we got to go back to the training phase and go through that piece of the framework all over again. And what I tell guys is you need to be responsible for taking somebody else through that. Because that's the ripple effect. Because now you have the ability to allow your recognition to lead you to empathy. So now use that for somebody. Like, don't just be like, I made it. Because that's another thing that we do. We're like, oh yeah, I made it. I got out. Okay, bro, good. All of them is back in. So go get them. Go get them. Show them the formula.
That's good. It's so good. And that shows strength to be able to get out, to get where you need to be, and then to be able to, in essence, go back and pull somebody back with you.
Yep.
Really shows that you've made it. Because we could say we made it, but I can leave and bring somebody back with me comfortably because I really belong there.
Mm-hmm.
Is so important. Oh,
it is.
That's amazing.
And as Black men, man, we got to do that.
Especially.
Yes, especially because here's what happens. And I'll be honest. There are periods of time in my life where I was guilty of this. Where you just like you see the young brothers on the corner. You like, man, they ain't doing nothing with their life. So what you gonna do, fam? Like, you just gonna say that and ride by and just be, that's it? Like, they were where you were. So it's important, man, that we're really being intentional about creating spaces where folk can just, we don't gotta preach to them or try to pour nothing down their throat. Allow them to just watch you. You're like, bro, just come hang out with me for a day. They see how you operate in business. They see how you operate with your family. They see how you do. You don't have to preach or teach nothing to them. Just let them watch you for a little bit. They're gonna ask questions like, "Oh, how you do that? Like, why is that happening? Why did she say that to you? Why? How come you ain't? And then now you get to, once that curiosity, peaks. Now you get to impart some stuff to them.
Those are the formative moments. Stuff like that. Little things that they see and they recognize and they kind of take it into themselves and they become better.
Yep.
Excellent. So the last letter when I do P.R.I.Z.E is I.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I go about the letter I in this, it doesn't mean anything, but what it represents is the man himself. So here's my question, my thought. When you take you and you take all the titles, all the shackles, everything that's thrown on us, and you get rid of it. So you're not a husband, a father, an employee, a pastor, a neighbor, anything. When it is just you at your core, who are you?
Man, that's an awesome question. I might have to borrow that one. That's a great question. I would say at the core, I am a guy who is battling some level of insecurity I won't say I'm masking it. I think I'm attempting to navigate it in a way that allows me to feel comfortable in the skin I'm in. So, and what is that skin? Because that's essentially the question you're asking. Is I am, I'm just I don't know if thoughtful is the right word, but I'm a thinker. And so I do a lot of introspection about what kind of person I am. And I think at the core, man, I'm just an insecure good guy.
That's a good description. I'm pretty close to that.
Yeah.
Are you coachable?
Yes, sir. Without a doubt. But here's the thing. Here's what I had to realize. What made me not coachable was the fact that I'm not sure how to navigate I'm not always sure how to navigate the insecure good guy. So that causes me to put a wall up because that's the only thing I can think of to protect myself, to protect that insecurity. So, but in protecting that insecurity, you also don't see the good guy and you don't get to impart anything to me from a coaching standpoint because the wall's there. So that's the piece that I, have to struggle with.
And we all have something. There's always some little thing. I think for me, it's always his journey to be that man. And for me, I can see him. I'm never really ever going to get there. But
Right.
for me, it's that constant journey to be him is really, it's really what I'm doing. Trying to be that guy is always the way.
And you know what it is? That, what you just described, is what success looks like. We're not taught that, man. We're taught that you're successful when you reach to the other side of that. When you figure out who that guy is, when he is who he is, and when we can crown him as who he says he is, right? We don't talk about the significance of the journey. And we don't give any accolades to the person who continues to put one foot in front of the other, chasing that. I think that's where the real beauty lies, is in the person who you can see consistently every day. They're chipping. They're chiseling every day. And with every chisel, you see them getting 1% better.
So true. It's true. It's true.
That's success.
That is. Success is not giving up ever.
Yep.
And to me, it's never, I don't know, I have goals, but I'll never really reach them because when I get close to the one that I think I want, there's another one further out. It's continuously trying to be better in every phase of life.
Yep. Trying
to be a good man, a good father, husband, all of these things. But I have to be good to start with.
Got to be good to start with. Because to show up as the best version of yourself in any scenario, you have to be the best version of yourself. So if you want to show up as the best version of yourself in fatherhood, you have to be the best version of yourself, not the best father. You got to be the best version of yourself.
So true.
Showing up in that.
So true. So very true. 3 last questions.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for answering the questions in the P.R.I.Z.E mantra. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
What are you afraid of that you cannot control?
Man, we're about to have a whole nother podcast.
Go!
What? So I'll give you one. And the reason why I talked about success is that for me, for a long time, success was wrapped up in finances, was wrapped up in accomplishments, was wrapped up in, all of those things, those tangible, quote unquote, things. The thing that I think I'm afraid of, that I absolutely have no control over, is whether those things put me in a position to be accepted as the insecure good guy or not. Now, here's on if I have the outer body experience, the coach in me is gonna be like, well, that don't matter, because it doesn't. But because at the core, I'm that insecure good guy, that's the thing I grapple with and think about. And I don't have no control over that. I have control over me and how I show up. And whatever happens with that is a result of how I show up. But what you do with that, I don't have any control over. But I worry about it.
We all do. What are you afraid of that you can control?
Finances.
Money.
And here's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid that I can't control it. I'm afraid that I can't control it.
And my last question. One of the reasons I did this podcast is one, talking, seeing men talk, being able to have somebody to talk to. And I hope this would kind of bring this out. Mm-hmm. And the last person I talked to brought up something. We kind of got into the discussion and we kind of touched on it a little bit here. Do you have a man in your life, and just to make it a little bit more difficult, that's not family, mm-hmm. that you, if something went down and you needed to talk to somebody that you comfortably know, pick up the phone, call them, and you could just drop it all on somebody? Do you have a person like that in your life now? Because most of us don't. We may have friends, but do you have somebody who you could lay it all on? And in a way, this is almost a religious question, but not. Do you have somebody human who you could call and that person would listen to you? No judgment, no reprisal, no nothing. Do you have a person like that in your life?
I do. I do have a person like that in my life. And I'm going to be honest, because we've been honest this whole time. I am not still at a place, even though I talk to guys about this and I wrote a book about my journey. I don't know that I'm all the way at a place where I know that he is available for that. I don't always allow him to be available for that. Listen, I'm going back to the core, insecure good guy. That insecurity is not 100% comfortable spilling 100% of the tea, even though I know that he's that person that I know would accept it. And there are other guys who I'm sure would say to me, "Hey, bro, I'm here for you," but I already know I'm not going that direction.
Right.
But this one person in particular, I know that I could, and he's done it with me.
Right.
And so that relationship is there. The insecure good guy doesn't always give up 100%.
Sometimes we are our own worst enemy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the fact that you have somebody is a good thing. Now accepting that person,
right,
and use them as the vessel that they can be, that's a whole nother step.
Go
ahead, sir.
I was going to say I went through a very long period of life before that person. Like this, that's it. I'm full transparency, for anybody who's listening, because what I believe, we talked about purpose, sharing my journey, mm-hmm. and how I'm navigating, right? And some of that navigation is in real time. So I'm talking about within the last 5 years that I even recognized that this person was giving me that level of availability. Up until then, man, it was my wife. And although she has been a rock, I would feel bad for having to give her that, because I don't want to give her that. You see how we,
of course,
see the mental acrobatics we do sometimes.
Oh, exactly. No doubt.
So
we're trying to figure things out, and we honestly don't know how to handle them, how to juggle them.
Right.
These emotions, what I do with them. Am I supposed to feel this way? Is there something wrong before feeling this way? Who do I tell about it? Will this person want to hear it? Will they think less of me when they hear it? There's so many things that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And I got to say, as I talk to you, as we kind of come to the end of this, married for 12 years, we've had our ups and our downs, and we've never done the couples counseling thing. And maybe that's something we will do. But listening to you talk, it occurs to me that if I was given the opportunity to talk to somebody in terms of couples counseling or whatever, to talk to somebody who seems like they've got it all together versus somebody who's like, you know what, I'm working on it. We're not perfect, but me and my wife, we have counselors that we talk to. I'd be more apt to talk to somebody who's like, I'm working on it, but I know how to help you because it's helping me. I would take somebody going through the process versus somebody who's figured it out.
Me too, all day long. All day long, because essentially what you're supposed to be doing in the coaching and counseling space, especially in the coaching space, is that you're supposed to be telling somebody, and it's funny, I used to tell my kids all the time, the reason why I share what I share with you is because it's like this. The analogy is this: if I go outside right now and I turn left and fall in a hole, when I get out of that hole, I'm going to come in the house and be like, hey, you about to go out? Okay, listen, when you go out, go right. Because I went left and I fell in the hole. The hole is there. Go right. That's what we're supposed to be doing. I'm not supposed to come in and be like, hey, I made it. I got out the hole. And then I don't say nothing else. Those are the people you gotta be afraid of. Because they just gonna let you die. Because they made it and they're gonna portray to you like they made it. And then the disconnect is you don't know what the process was. You don't know they fell in a hole. They broke their arm. They got their arm set. They got washed off. They got cleaned up, put on new clothes. All you see is the new clothes because that's all they're showing you. They're not giving you any of the process. I'll sit down with somebody who will give me process all day long. All day long.
So true.
And I think that the thing, and not, trust me, this is not a toot my own horn kind of thing, but what we've noticed is that people resonate with us more when we share our journey with them. Because then they're like, wait a minute, hold on, you went through that? Like, like you felt that way about her too? So what'd you do? Now we can get somewhere. As soon as that, so what'd you do? That's the key that unlocks the door for me to give you some new perspective.
Like that. It brings a story to mind. I'm going to do my best to say it the right way. I'm a TV nerd. I'm an 80s kid. I grew up on 80s television and 90s television, but one of my favorite shows is called The West Wing.
Okay.
I love it. And there's a story, kind of an analogy that's told. And one character is saying to another. So there's this guy and he's walking down the street and he falls down into a hole. And the preacher walks by. He says, hey, I'm stuck in this hole. I can't get out. And the priest says 5 Hail Marys, and then he goes. And then a banker walks by and he says, oh, hey, excuse me. I'm in this hole. I can't get out. The banker throws down some money and he walks by. But then a friend comes up and he says, hey, I'm stuck. I'm in this hole. I can't get out. And the friend jumps in the hole. And he's like, what are you doing? Now we're stuck in the hole together. He's like, yeah, but I've been in this hole before and I know how to get out. And we climb out together. And you telling me that, that's one of my favorite moments in that show. But that's so important in terms of just who we're willing to deal with.
Yep.
Experience. You've been through that struggle. I can talk to you. You know what I'm feeling. That's the person that I'm going to follow. That's the person who's going to help me. And 9 times out of 10, that person is either a friend or somebody that I can trust to help me in situations.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's gold.
I love that. I love that show. It's beautifully written, but it resonates so much in terms of especially Black men and friendship. I really love that idea.
Yeah, that's gold. That is gold. And that's what we all need in life. Somebody like that.
Yes, that person. And my hope, as I kind of finish this off, is that I'm that kind of person for somebody else.
Yeah.
And that's it. If I'm good with myself, then I'm that person that somebody else needs. And I'm going to get them out of the hole at some point.
Awesome.
What to do.
I love it.
So thank you. This is just a fantastic conversation. I could keep talking with you, but we got lives to live. We can't do this. But where can people find you? Social media, website? Give us all. What's going on? What do you have happening?
So the central hub is the website, which is Denoli, DEN as in Nancy, OLI. It's simply the first 3 letters of my wife's name, Denise, and the first 3 letters of my name, Oliver. DENOLI.org is kind of the central hub for everything. Right now, we're focusing a lot on YouTube. So it's youtube.com/@Denoli, youtube.com/Denoli LLC.
Okay.
All of our social media is Denoli LLC. So if Instagram, Pinterest, LinkedIn, everywhere is Denoli LLC.
Okay.
We're focusing a lot on YouTube, doing some things over there, bringing some new series over there and doing some stuff there. So we would love folk to come hang out with us there. The website, you can get information about the book and different things there. So those are the central hubs right now.
All right. I think I'm going to start following you. I think I followed you on Facebook. I'm going to find you on the rest of your places there because I feel like you are a wealth of information. It was an absolute pleasure to speak with you.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Please, let's stay connected.
Oh, no doubt. You're not going to get rid of me, bro. Seriously. I found you. We're not going anywhere.
Hey, I love it. I'm down. I'm down for it all. Let's do it.
I love a good quote. I end all my episodes with a quote, and I'm going to end it with this one. Emotional pain cannot kill you, but running from it can. Allow, embrace, let yourself feel, let yourself heal. I think that's imperative for us, for ourselves, for our relationships, for everything. Don't fight what's coming to you. Take it in, absorb it, keep the good and get rid of the bad. But life is meant to live and it's going to hurt sometimes, but it's better to feel it than to fight it.
I love it.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all the listeners on the Men of the Prize podcast where your inner monologue is revealed. It's been a pleasure and I will see you next week. Have a good one.